What is going on, everybody? Happy Thursday.
Get that depressed sound out of your voice. I mean, come on, give me a break.
Look, Sheets, you should understand better than most people.
I do.
And it's not the same thing finishing fourth in a tournament and having a night. Look, I'm on a nice little run, nice little heater, but it's you want to close those out. You want to close out the, it's literally 10x.
Absolutely.
So, and not to mention that I had the double time, 2 times I was in third place and nothing happens, but I get moved back because a steal was taken away from Morris, then a steal was taken away from Zubac. But I'm going to share my screen and talk a little bit about last night before we jump into tonight's 6-gamer. I appreciate all the kind words and everybody, saying I was unlucky. Look, I ran really good to start. It was terrific. I'm so used to sheet sharing his screen. I'm like forgetting how to do it almost. Anyway,
You're
this
good.
is my lineup from last night in the 600. I played 2 lineups in here. I also played 2 in the 250, which both one was a finished 6th or 7th, and the other finished like 20th or something. So those were nice too. Another nice little night. Now, here's what happened with my lineup. I'll tell you real quick what I was building with. The Joe Harris thing was the biggest thing that I was sort of questioning myself on, but I wanted to get that game stacked somewhat. And you can see in my other lineup, I believe I used Shamit, which was not obviously optimal because he did not do anything. Yeah, he had 8 fantasy points. And I went with a very different build over there. So just to get into it real quick, my frustration about last night was not necessarily the last game in the Zubac Morris production. Although I will say Morris playing all the minutes and going 1 for 10 from 3 was not helpful. He missed 7 consecutive threes between the 3rd and 4th quarter. And that was really tough. I mean, every one of those, leaps you up a huge amount. And not to mention you hit a few of them and you're running away with things. The part that was tough was DeLon Wright with 44.5 fantasy points going into the 4th quarter in a close game, ending up at 45.5. I had given up on the slate even before Morris and Zubac a little bit started their games. Sabonis, who was crushing 59 in the first 3 quarters, 2 in the 4th, and he did play the 4th. So at least we got the run there. Joe Harris, 0 fantasy points, I believe, in the 4th quarter. That's a little tough. Thaddeus Young, 30, I think he had 31, and then not to mention the just missing the double-double for Thaddeus Young by a couple. A couple.
Hold on, before you go on, because I'm going to forget to do this. So yeah. Bobby texted me in the middle of the slate. I'd already was locked in doing other stuff. Bobby, you texted me saying that I'm playing Thaddeus Young. I think he's a really, really good play. And I didn't follow up with you. I didn't ask why. I didn't ask whatever it is. And then I see it in this lineup at 0.9%. Talk me through that a little bit.
So the Thaddeus Young thing, look at the games they've played recently. 21-point blowout against OKC, 23-point blowout against Toronto in their favor. Miami, which they lost by 11, but actually could have gone, literally they could have lost that game by 30. They were getting crushed. The other thing about that one is that they changed the starting lineup after this. So this is the new starting lineup Bulls with Thaddeus Young in the starting lineup, even though they were playing and they put Carter on the bench. And you look at the production, okay? They're basically running everything through him. 7 assists, 6 assists, and these are in 22 and 23 minutes. Now, if the game is close, he's going to play 30 minutes. Extrapolate out his current production with the roster the way it's constructed, not to mention his on-off court numbers with Levine are phenomenal, which means obviously if he's starting, he's going to play more with Levine. So if you extrapolate it out, to 31 minutes like he played, boom, you get your 36 fantasy points. Now, it could have even been better than that. I mean, he was on pace at times to really explode.
So hang on just a second. So again, I'm gonna spend all time on this because I think this is much more important than the going over today's stuff. But what you're gonna do, okay?
Yeah.
But say so we're doing this now. So you're showing me now. How did you come to? In other words, did you just have 6,100 left and you're like, okay, who do I get for 61? Or did you him and say, okay, how do I get him in? How did this all happen?
I decided to play I talked a lot on air about how I had Zubac on my main lineup and how I had Morris was one of my favorite plays if Ibaka was out. And with all the question marks, Morris would have been 30% owned. Ibaka would have been 30% owned had we known this to the whole day.
Yes, we talked about this. Yeah.
Yeah. So you get them at lower ownership. And I didn't want to play them together. It's not the ideal combination to play together because they will play together a lot. They both started and they both played most of their minutes together, but they'll also come out for each other when they're down late. They'll have Morris on the court and not Zubac in their small ball lineup. So, but I realized if I wanted to play those guys and I had to decide I wanted to commit to the right, and then I wanted to commit to 3 Brooklyn players running it back with Sabonis. That was my main thing that I was trying to do, and I found the right 3 Brooklyn guys, at least the three for me. I didn't play.
So you had like 6K, and you're like, okay, so you did like kind of like research, like kind of on the fly of everybody that was within the 6K range.
I had 6,400,
Right.
and you can see here, or I could have gone a different route and played one of Morris and Zubac, and there were still other decent options at the time. But I looked at Thaddeus Young, and I was saying, well, everybody's, look at this. These production numbers are really misleading because of these minutes. These minutes are not the minutes he's expected. And I looked at his projections. He was projected to play 26 minutes.
Yep.
If the game is reasonably close, there's just no way that happens. Why would I think that? And by the way, they were up a bunch in that game against San Antonio at one point, but there's no reason to assume the Bulls are going to blow out San Antonio, a team that basically doesn't get blown out hardly ever. So
Love it.
I jumped over to that, and I realized the ownership would be non-existent. And I felt really safe for him. She's not a guy who I felt like I was going to go out there and win me a tournament. And the reason I didn't talk about him all day is he's not a guy who I thought was going to get 45 to 55 or something like that and win you a tournament. But when you find a guy like that, you can plug in with enough upside and a pretty high floor that you can, that at no ownership, he's the guy who can kind of get you along. Because by that point, I knew right off the bat, I mean, Sabonis had like 30 in the first quarter. We knew Harden was going to go nuts, so that was an obvious one. Joe Harris, Jeff Green got off to a nice start as well. So everything was looking good. So all I had to do was try and get my 6x, my 6 to 7. And DeLon Wright, I felt somewhat similar about. But I did mention a number of times that playing against your old team, against your old teammates, I really believe matters to certain guys. And he is one of those guys. He had a big game like this against Toronto last year. And they won the title right after they got rid of it. Like it's a whole thing. So I sort of like that, playing that narrative. And then I decided I wanted to keep Morris and Zubac in the same lineup, which wasn't my original plan, but it did work out. It is frustrating that they ended up with a combined 4 fantasy points in the fourth quarter. That would have been huge. Not to mention the 0.25 points that I was over these guys, and not to mention it's all of my old RG now Run Pure Sports buddies in Big T, DeKins, and JSU Rob. Like it was like who's
the Skins? I don't know him.
I know he's a RPS guy. I don't know which guy he is, and I don't want to say it because I don't want to like. I really don't know.
If it's in fact someone from there, I'm sure they're gonna. It's like all over Twitter that they ran one.
I almost didn't want to post the thing on Twitter, but I had people DM me, "How am I doing?" Because it looked like you were going to win everything last night. So I decided to post it. But then immediately, of course, people start retweeting at Big T and all this stuff. Oh, you beat Bobby again, and whatever. You know what I mean? And you know what? You can save it, guys. I said the other day, Big T's a terrific player. What I really love about this one lineup, boom, and he's there. I thought that was I'm really impressed by what he does. We have a very similar style. If you look at the guys we play, we often play.
Oh, it's good because you want to know why? Because he really needs the money.
Seriously, what the hell? I still think the Jordan Poole thing, like I said, perfect matchup for Jordan Poole, but not a thing I was going to get involved in only because I felt like it was so reliant on a blowout. Now it turns out they used him a little bit more than that. So you could argue that I may have made a mistake here and there. I think the Frank Jackson play was pretty awful.
And you're not exactly allowed to complain as much about Sabonis because he had Sabonis too.
Oh no, absolutely. I was just saying that the overall, I went upstairs to go have dinner with my family and hang out with my friends and stuff, and they love basketball, and I'm showing them this. But it all looked good still at the time, and that's why I wrote to you. I don't feel awesome about this lineup because I'm going, wow, I really just lost out on a ton of points from DeLon Wright in his 1 fantasy point fourth. I mean, that was the big one because he's 1% owned. Thaddeus Young, not getting quite there, to 40 would have been just massive, or getting the double, which would have immediately put him that extra 5 points, would have put me right there. You know what I mean? I just would have felt like much more attainable. If you would have told me Marcus Morris and Zubac would have been as involved as they were, I would have thought that they would have put up a combined 80 to 90. They were all over the place. Morris, I mean, he took 1 million shots, and he was 1 for 10. I think he was 1 for 10 from 3. Zubac was heavily involved, but they ended up getting blown out a little bit, so they had to pull Zubac off the court with 6 minutes to go to try and play their small ball lineup and try and get the threes going and all that, which left Morris on the court. But again, as I mentioned, he couldn't make a 3. There's a lot of wet routes that mostly this wins. Mostly, I don't want to sit and dwell on it. I wanted to get that part out the way, and we talked over. I think that was good, and a good answer to the strategy question, right, Sheets, about the Thad Young.
Yeah, because I'm always just wondering how you come up with it,
Yeah, because I mean, look, I've told everybody this. The way you play basketball these days on big slates, I think it's like you're still playing the game. The game starts after lunch.
The reason why I mention it is because, as I always say, like when people review their lineups that after the fact, like after they won something, it's always like so easy for people to after the fact say, oh well, this was a good play because this obviously, and I played this obviously because of this or whatever. And I always like to hear her process of how it leads up to it, because it's not like, you know what I mean, because it was a combination of paying attention to late swap, right, paying attention to Zubac news, and then like you said, while Thad Young wasn't on the 100% radar, right, when you get down to it at the end, when you're like, okay, now I'm not going to need to record, I don't need to analyze the whole slate, I just need to analyze the guys between 6K and 7K, right? And only those guys that are still left to play. Okay. Right. So now that's when you could do the deep dive into the, when you have such only a smaller handful of people that you can look at. Because if you had like a 13-game slate and it's like noon or whatever it is, there's no way we would have spent like an hour, 40 minutes like looking into the Thad Young, stuff. But because you were smart enough to have like the late swap going and then say, okay, now I've reduced my player pool to basically 15 guys I can choose from. Right. I can spend the time necessary to really dig into those things, which was really big, I think.
Right. And by the way, not that 400 is a ton to leave on the table. I'm not a guy who would usually plan to build a lineup with leaving 400 in a big buy-in tournament on a 11-game slate, because the pricing is pretty well constructed. But I really think that Thad Young thing, I always feel bad if there's a guy who I don't mention in our shows that ends up coming up on my lineup. Oh. But literally with basketball, it's not the same as football or baseball. I played all the other guys I talked about. And then at the end, when I tried to figure out my best path, he's the guy who fit in. And I mean, you could look, I barely had Thaddeus Young in any lineups, but this was the right move to make. It was the right adjustment. And when we got the official word about Ibaka being out, I just said, you know what, F it. And I believe I left Zubac as I don't think I had room anymore for Morris, but I believe I left Zubac as he was my center on both of my 600s. And I had Morris on both of my FanDuel lineups, I believe, which I cashed deep in one of those. So, it was a good night, a really good night. It probably not reflected by the winnings compared, in the long run. I might go back and go, God, I could have won that one. But it was a good night. We're on a good run. Let's get to the night.
Because that. I'd like to go over one other thing about last night. Okay. Yeah. So did I lose money on draft? I lost money on little Draftkings, lost money on FanDuel. But even though I didn't get Thad Young right at 0.9%, and even though I didn't win 5 figures or whatever, I'd like the record to reflect that I won 50 cents off of freaking Bobby.
That's right.
In our side bet, saying that it was going to be a lower scoring slate than 379.5. And that was before there was a rule out or something that made Harden even more of a lock. Now I forget who that was. That was before Kyrie was even ruled out. Okay. So I might have lost like probably $15,000 more than Bobby won, but I made 50 cents. So I got that going for you.
So you got that going for you. All right. Well, let's jump into the night. I think that was actually, I do like going over the process, and maybe I'll do it losing lineups one of these nights. I think that actually makes sense to go through where things went wrong too. And one other thing is that because the slate was so big, and because of what I'm starting to do something different, and I may actually break it a little bit today because I kind of want to build out I think I might want to do a massive build today because it's an easier, more manageable slate. But the way the slate was constructed, I have my 100 lineups or whatever that I'm breaking down into different pieces. And starting with that core and keeping it the same, I had 35% DeLon Wright last night, and I wasn't going to change from that. I want to stick to the guys I want to stick to, and then we'll find those other pieces. Having said all that, you ready to get into it, man? You want to call your screen up?
I'll do my screen. So.
By the way, also another fiery start for golf. Sheets is just running away at the beginning with Matt Jones again.
What do you mean?
Gotta love it.
So we got like a 3-stroke lead. Oh, on the last hole of par 5, only he's 199 from the hole in the middle of the fairway.
Here we go with the course record. He hits an albatross.
Dude, I just want a freaking par and get my bogey free round and go home.
Yeah, I'll take it too. He's in my big lineups, 53% or 55% of them. For me.
With all this bunker and all this sand and all this stuff, just put it right over here. But he's not going to. 199, he's going to have to go for it.
Well, I'm basically right in the lead.
The funny thing is, you want to know why he's waiting. He's been waiting every hole because it's really funny because Tringali's like ahead of him.
Yeah.
And Tringali like double bogeyed like the par 3 a couple of holes ago, which basically held up the rest of the freaking field. And then there was also some narrative talked about, like when they were talking about Matt Jones this morning, saying he's like the fastest player on like the PGA Tour. So he's probably just like waiting for for Cameron Jindali to get off the freaking green or something.
That's hilarious. By the way, also John Hood with a nice little 200, start.
Fine by me.
I'll take that.
Fine
Patrick
by me.
Rogers looking pretty decent. Chase Seifert, who we talked a little bit about. I mean, there's some good stuff going. So hopefully that holds up.
Matt Jones at literally 100-1 on the outright bet is the sweat.
That's a sick one, man. I knew I had to get him. That's why I have him over 50%. Like that's pretty great.
All right, let me pull up DraftKings.
All right,
and we'll get started.
All right, let's do it.
So I guess I'll start. First game, Utah at Washington. I am presuming, because of the runs that I'm seeing on my screen, that I guess Mike Conley is out?
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, so one of the top values on my board is Joe Ingles at 5,200. And all these guys just are naturally going to get rates boost, right? Between Mitchell, Clarkson. I don't think they're going to get, I don't think Mitchell or Clarkson, we should get a minutes boost or anything like that. They're probably going to play the same minutes anyway. Maybe Ingles might get more
Clarkson
minutes.
should get a boost for minutes, I think.
Clarkson, you think?
Yeah, I think he'll get up to like 30 instead of like 26.
Okay. And there's certainly a decent, certainly some amount of blowout risk involved with everybody in the game. Just there's all Utah games and all Washington games. But as you pointed out, Washington's been keeping stuff close, man. So I wouldn't exactly 100% count on that. So Ingles, Mitchell, Clarkson, they're the top kind of like raw, point per dollar plays. I'd have to think just instinctively that Gobert is a good play.
Yeah.
Against Alex Len et al. Right. With respect to Washington, dude, once again, I'm seeing freaking Alex Len. But unfortunately now I'm seeing Alex Len at maybe 20% ownership, which not exactly thrilled about that.
It's interesting. They fixed his projection in terms of minutes to be where, remember we pointed out that the 32 minutes was a little bit of an outlier.
Yeah.
But they didn't fix his production. They gave him through the roof because he had a big game the other day. But do we really think that's, the most optimal thing against Gobert? Or don't you think maybe Lopez? I don't know. It's just an interesting thing to think about.
I'll tell you something else about the salaries in this. I know that they're playing, Utah or whatever it is. I know he hasn't exactly been lighting up recently, but 9,100 on Beal's almost getting disrespectful. Not. I don't know if it was exactly disrespectful yet, but it certainly feels like it. 8,900 would be, from a visual disrespectful, right? But 9,100 is kind of feeling that way. So that's kind of where I'm at. I guess Beal would be my favorite of those, but it's so hard, man, to prioritize anybody over Westbrook. But I think either of those are fine. I think they keep the game close, and if they keep the game close, it's going to be because of those two dudes, and maybe play Ingles and one of the other Utah guys. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is a game that so just to give some background. So it is a back-to-back for Washington.
Wait. Excuse me. He just made an eagle to close out the round.
Let's go. You know what? The only thing that sucks about it is if Berger did play, his ownership would have been significantly lower because Berger kind of like. Look at this guy. That's our pretty awesome stuff.
All right, let's get back to it.
All right, Utah, Washington. So, look, Washington is in a really weird spot here because it's really they keep losing games. They should have won the game last night against Sacramento. I'm really glad that game didn't go into overtime because that would have sort of squashed a lot of my lineups. Actually, would have probably I might have won the 250, so it might have actually been better for me because I had Beal in that one and I had basically all of Sacramento. So. Look, I think that Westbrook is a much better play here than he's getting credit for. He's going to be the lower owned of the bunch. So automatically he is somebody I'll have similar ownership between he and Beal. Beal's the better play because really just the price difference. And you tend to want to beat Utah from the outside. Westbrook as an attacking guard doesn't match up statistically as well against a team that's really good at protecting the paint. But I'll just point out when Westbrook is Westbrook, and I think he's been Westbrook lately, it doesn't really matter. And also, if you look at, again, as I've mentioned with Giannis and a bunch of other guys who are similar type, it's odd to say Giannis and Westbrook are similar, but they are guys who get their points in the paint and attack the basket. These guys have had a lot of their career high games against Utah. Now, with Beal and Westbrook both playing, obviously that takes, mostly that was with Westbrook with either Paul George or without or by himself or whatever. But I do think in these difficult matchups, they're going to rely on these guys, and they're desperate for wins. They've had, 4 really close losses to the best teams in basketball other than Sacramento. They had the 2 losses to Milwaukee, and they just had some really tough runs lately. So if they don't win soon, they're going to start eliminating themselves from playoff contention. And from everything I understand is they're still wanting to do that. So keep an eye out to see if somebody rests. But right now I would rank it. Beal is the better play because of the price difference, but Westbrook probably at his ownership, it probably makes them about where you want to have the same ownership on both. Right now I'm leaning about 20% of each of them. Another one that's kind of interesting is Neto, just because the minutes lately, and they seem to play him every time the games get kind of shaky. I don't think we need to go there for value, but he has put up 20 or more in 3 out of the last 4 and played 27 minutes in the last game yesterday. At 3,800, I think you could do worse. I don't think he's like a must play. I would rather take shots on, unfortunately, the guys who have really been struggling. And Avdia's minutes are all over the place. I would still take a shot there because he can shoot his way into the game. Bertan's minutes are all over the place. I would take a shot there because these are 10% guys I really think you want to get exposure to. And I don't have Alex Len any more than a 10 to, I have him 10 to 20 right now. I don't know what I'm going to do with that. My guess is I'll probably end up being well under the field on him because I just feel like it's not like I don't know. My guess is we can probably get better value later. And I think there's a lot of variance in the range of outcomes. But for him to be owned by a quarter of the field seems like too much. I do think it's going to be hard not to play some of these Utah guys. Donovan Mitchell for the huge upside, which I think he really has against this team. So Mitchell, Beal kind of lineup makes sense. Gobert should smash, but I would say again, just the one thing I would remind people about Gobert. Now the matchup is so good, it may not matter, but he has primarily been, for the most part. I mean, look, Golden State, he smashed the other night, so he's not always, but he's usually a little bit better and a little bit more plotting games for his ceilings. But this game is going to be lightning quick, and the opportunity should be great. Jordan Clarkson is the guy I want to be probably right with the field on because he's going to be pretty highly owned, but I want about 20 to 30% of them as of right now. And everybody on this Utah team, Bogdanovich, I'd want about 10%. And Joe Ingles being the main one, you probably want 30 to 45% or so. But I'll be splashing with a lot of these guys. In terms of who correlates, you don't want to play Clarkson with Mitchell, I don't think. But this matchup is so good, you might be able to. But I think, maybe Mitchell and Gobert, maybe Clarkson and Gobert, maybe Ingles and Gobert, maybe Ingles and Ingles and Mitchell make some sense. So things like that. And then you could always throw in Royce O'Neal as if you needed 5,100. But I think this game is stackable. It's got a high total. I personally, if this wasn't a back-to-back, I would jump on the over in this game. And I would definitely bet Washington to cover the 11.5 points. But that number does make me sort of feel like maybe Bradley Beal or Westbrook sits, and maybe they're going to give up soon. I really hope not. But that's a lot of talking for a game that I think is really important. So I'm done with that.
All right, you want to move on?
Yep.
By the way, last golf thing that was for Birdie actually. So
okay.
he's in with a 61.
Woo.
61. Ready? Has this for around 9 pars, 9 birdies.
Well, I gotta love this. You love to see it.
All right. All right. Oklahoma City, Atlanta. No, this is not Trey going home to Oklahoma. I always double check that. So Trey Young. Well, first thing we have to figure out is who's playing, right, for Oklahoma City. So I guess the first person we know is playing for Oklahoma City is Moses Brown. Right? So they've really jacked his price up to 4,300. Is he starting still?
I would doubt it. I mean, Horford should be back. He's not on the injury report, Horford. My guess is that no, he wouldn't be starting.
I would hope not. But why not? That would be my comment. If they don't need to win, they're not trying to win anyway. What the hell's the point? So I still think that Moses Brown is. I mean, they have to keep playing him. So
they
at 43,
kind of do, but it's going to be actually hard for him to get in the rotation much, just with the size of their guys. I'm sorry. I just wanted to throw that.
Yeah,
out.
I don't know what to make of this yet. You got to see some coach speak. Gotta be whatever. But if he's still in the rotation at 4,300, I mean, he's gonna if he gets 20 minutes, that's gonna be enough.
Yep.
So he remains in play. Then I didn't come up with is Shea at 9K a good play?
I mean, I think we had to talk about just whether Maladon or Dort play because it's a totally different slate. Totally different game. Okay. So if Maladon and Dort are both out, I think that's when Shea becomes the 9K. look, he's too expensive, probably. I mean, not too whatever. However you want to say it. I don't love him as much as I'd like a Bradley Beal, for example, in that game. But I think that people like this is if Horford was out, he was, we saw this spot the other night. This is like a 30% owned spot, usually for him, and that was on a bigger slate. And again, in the matchups about the same with the Bulls and the Hawks. There's always blowout risk also with this OKC team, even though they've actually stayed close. But the other night that was a weird one. They were getting blown out anyway. But I think Shea would be interesting if Dort and Maladon are both out. But really, I think the guys we'd be talking about more would be Ty Jerome, and he would probably be the one who stands out the most if for some reason both those guys are out. If they're in, I think we can pretty safely not want to play anybody in this game, with the exception of the 10% shot Moses Brown, the 10% shot Pokuevsky.
Well, what about Clint Capela if he plays?
I'm talking about on OKC side.
Oh, I thought you meant in the whole game. Oh, sorry.
No, just OKC side. Capela, if he plays, is going to be, as you know, and I think that I've become it was you early in the season, Sheets, and then it became me. Like you played Capela every week and every day, it felt like. Now I've become the guy who plays Capela every time he plays. I think Capela, look.
And this is a pretty. I mean, whether I don't know against Horford, but if he gets minutes against Moses Brown, that's a nice matchup for Capela.
Yeah, and against Horford, it's not quite as good, so it's not quite the automatic smash play. But I would say that he's cheap for his upside on a 6-game slate, and definitely stands out as being the best player on Atlanta. Along with a guy who's popping for, like I played him the other night. He always shows like early in the day, like he's going to be like 20% owned. And then by the time the slate comes around, he's 1% owned, but he did well for me the other day too. And he's done it, he definitely has a ceiling. Mostly it's going to be in the 35-ish range, which we'll take is Kevin Huerter. But I'm not as interested in the Trae Youngs. I'm not as interested in these other guys in this matchup personally. I do think we could talk about our guy Bogdanovich and his lack of getting there, but I do, at some point he's going to break that open. But before we know for this team, it's really hard to, because if Capela and Kongu are out again, we just have to play John Collins again, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And John Collins, by the way, maybe we should just play him anyway. I mean, they've got a good thing going. They're winning all these games with him going nuts. Maybe they do make him more part of the offense, even if Capela's back. Maybe he gets to play 33, 34 minutes. And by the way, those last couple of games, they were blowouts somewhat. So Collins' minutes probably could have added another 4 or 5 on there, and he would have been well in the 50s. Yeah, I like Collins and Capela if Capela's in. If Capela and Okongwu are out, I think John Collins is a really, really tough fade. And I don't really see it giving anyone else a giant boost, with the exception of maybe Huerter some minutes, maybe Bogdanovich some minutes.
Well, I have a dumb question. Are we like bad? And when I say are we bad, were we just wrong about Bogdanovich all this time? Is he just not good? I mean, I can't imagine.
No.
Why is he the whole season he hasn't done anything?
Can we say that Atlanta's bad? How about that?
No, that's very possible.
They have a poorly. Well, it is. It's the truth. I mean, they got hot. They've done well since Lloyd Pierce has been fired. They're on a run right now, but they really run their team. I said it when they signed all these guys in the offseason. I was like, what the hell do they think is going to happen? I mean, remember we felt like idiots for playing Gallinari for 2 months, and now Gallinari's the nuts every night.
Yeah.
So it's weird. I mean, it's just the way that they run. You're going to play a team that basically run a 1-4 offense. It's Trae Young at the top, and he'll just do what he wants. And I don't understand it. I mean, they have a million great options. They'll do the screen and roll when Capela's in the game. Collins is skilled offensively, so they let him go off a little bit. But they have all this talent, and I just don't feel like they understand how to put it together. And Bogdanovich is a guy who's better with the ball in his hands. It doesn't really make sense as a side companion for Trae Young. But I still think that there's always going to be upside with his price. And one of these days, he'll play with the second unit and he'll score 20 fantasy points in no time. And they'll leave him out there for all the Trae minutes and the other ones. He'll play 30 minutes and he'll put up 40 fantasy points. It's going to happen again. We saw him go through weeks where this happened in Sacramento. It would be nice if he played somewhere once where he actually got to play 30 minutes, 28 minutes, and didn't play with 3 other guards all the time. So I don't blame Bogdanovich. I blame the system, and I think the injury didn't help either. Also, we haven't been playing him that much. We've talked about him a lot. We haven't really, at least I haven't been playing. He hasn't been like a staple in my lineups anytime recently.
No, he hasn't been a staple, but I've been torching a little bit of money on him. I mean, not that much.
I would have torched him on him, but there's always late news that I find other ways to get out of it, and it always is Marcus Morris or something like that.
Very true.
You want to go to Orlando and your Knicks?
Yeah. I don't particularly like any value stuff on Orlando, but what I would say is that, I mean, I'm looking at ownership here. If is Vooch going to be low owned?
I would imagine he will be. Yeah, like really low owned.
Yeah. This is weird. Maybe you should start with this. I'm a little confused.
Okay, I'll start with it.
No, it's fine. No, I'm looking at Vooch here. I'm just kind of trying to figure exactly why he'd be low owned in the spot, but he's looking to be low owned. I don't know. I'll try it. That's the best I can. That's the best I can say. I mean, I'm not too worried about Nerlens Noel defense if that's the deal.
The reason,
and then on the it's kind of a shame that I said I keep him waiting for this. Cole Anthony's still out. He hasn't had a chance, I don't think, to play Madison Square Garden yet. And then I guess on the Knicks side, I would go back to, oh man, Quigley 6,300.
He's questionable too.
And so we gotta wait and see. So I guess Barrett would be my first play. Maybe Burks. Yeah, we gotta watch the news on this one. I guess I'm just not prepared for this game.
Yeah, it's definitely going to take whatever happens with Quickly. It's going to matter. But the reason why Vooch isn't popping at all is because Terrence Ross, Gordon, and Fournier are supposed to be back. Now, any of those guys are out, Vooch is going to start popping and will have ownership. If all of them are out, his ownership, he'll definitely have some ownership. And I don't know how high it'll be, but he'll definitely have some ownership. But with all those guys back, the reason why we've loved him so much partially is because every single thing has been focused entirely through him.
Doesn't it anyway?
No.
Okay.
I mean, Fournier is pretty reasonable usage. Terrence Ross has high usage.
Okay.
And Aaron Gordon has pretty reasonable usage as well.
So Gordon's back too, you were saying. Okay.
Yeah. So and even if limited minutes, it's just going to take away a little bit from Vooch. And I don't think it's a good matchup statistically for Vooch. The Knicks do a really good job in the interior. So I'm not as interested in their side. I definitely will sprinkle some Vooch in if he does stay low owned. And even if he doesn't, I think he's a reasonable enough play. I'm probably going to be below. If people are really going to play a ton of Randall at 10K, and I love Randall in general, I actually don't love him in this matchup as much, but he's been great lately. You certainly can't criticize someone for playing him at 10K. I want to find something else to do. I'd rather try and get to Westbrook at 10-2. I know it sounds weird, like different positions, but I think I'd rather play Westbrook at 10-2 at half the ownership of Julius Randle at 10K. Just feels like a better opportunity there for me. I do like Barrett. And I mean, assuming that Quickly is out, or whether he is or out or not, actually, I like Alec Burks. And we're going to get the low-owned, the guy who fouled himself into trouble the other night and had 4 fouls at halftime, I believe, Reggie Bullock, which cut down. He only played 29 minutes instead of playing his normal 50. But he's still Reggie Bullock, I'll just point out, 3 games of 20 in a row, 4 out of the last 5, has a 32 mixed in there. It's a good matchup for guards, and especially with the Knicks being shorthanded, and especially if Quickly is out, we can start looking at him. And we can also, I'm actually, I mean, look, Ntilikina will play minutes, so we probably have to consider him even. I know it sounds weird, but it should play a lot of minutes. Or Austin Rivers might be back into the mix, just giving you minimum cost long shot options. But the main guys to focus on are Burks and Barrett for me.
Okay.
New Orleans, Portland. I feel like New Orleans and Portland play more games than most teams do. Doesn't it feel? I don't know. For some reason,
I used to think that about Indiana, Orlando last year. Remember, every single day, I thought Indiana played Orlando.
It felt like it. What are your thoughts on the New Orleans side? We just saw this, so I feel like we can get some.
I mean, not much, honestly. Ingram again, maybe. Nobody's really standing out, man. I don't know. I guess Ingram, Zion, they're both about equal for me. Yeah, they're all right. So Zion and Ingram, Zion and Williamson, Zion and Ingram on the New Orleans side. And boy, oh boy, we thought that we talked about this. We thought Lillard was going to have a little drop off with CJ McCollum back. What do you get? 70 fantasy points?
You know what's crazy is I think he had 35 of those fantasy points, maybe more in the fourth quarter alone.
Always does. He just always does.
Did you see that end of that game? I mean, New Orleans, that was one of the most brutal losses of the season. That might be one of the most brutal losses I've ever seen. That game was over 7 times. It was no joke. It was like a 9-point game with like 50 seconds left. You know what I mean? Lillard hits a 30-footer. They get a steal. Lillard hits another 30-footer. It was absolutely wildness. And I have no idea how New Orleans lost. They were up by like 20 something early on. And I'm sorry, in the third quarter, I think, too.
Well, you know what? Neither of these teams are really great defensively. They both play really fast, and that puts a lot of variance into these games. You know what I mean?
Right.
So these no lead is safe. That's basically the idea.
Right.
So is it gross to play Lillard at 11K?
No, not on this slate.
So he's fine. And I didn't like anybody else in Portland. So for me, it was going to be either Ingram or Zion, but not both. Lillard just feels so dirty at 11K, but like you said on this slate, I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know who's going to outscore him. I mean, you can make the case that obviously that LeBron and Westbrook are outscore him, but it's a lot of raw points against the fast team that's up for grabs. So I instinctively I don't want to do it, but I'll have to think about it.
Well, we have to see what they do again. They played Nickeil Alexander-Walker a bunch more minutes. He was really good the other night. I'm kind of curious to see how that ends up shaking out because Nickeil Alexander-Walker right now I have is a pretty good value. I actually like this game, the Utah game, definitely stand out. I mean, the games we've talked about. So we just saw this matchup on a big slate, and it was interesting to see how the ownerships win, and a lot of it made sense. I think that we go back to a lot of the same things. We want some exposure to Ingram, some exposure to Zion, but as I said the other night, like Damian Lillard is not defending this year. And this team, you can do whatever you want when no one pressures the ball. If no one pressures Lonzo, that's the way you get to Lonzo, is to pressure the ball. Nobody pressures the ball on the Portland side except for Gary Trent, who is usually matched up with Brandon Ingram or one of the other guys, whether it be Hart or Bledsoe or Alexander Walker. Unless they decide to just completely switch things around, I think you're going to have Lonzo Ball, and I'm not saying he's going to have 17 assists again, but he should have the court wide open for him if they're going to play him like they did last time. He put up 46 in this matchup the other night. I don't expect crazy high ownership. So Lonzo is my favorite, along with Zion, probably about the same ownership for me. And then Ingram would be next. And then I want exposure to Hart, Bledsoe, and currently Alexander Walker, but I may come back on that. They may flip back over to Kira Lewis. It seems like they didn't want Kira Lewis to be on the court with Dame at the same time the other night. I think the interesting play on the Portland side is what do we do about CJ McCollum? Maybe that's the play here. You know, he played 26 minutes the other night under, quote unquote strict minutes things, which people were guessing was going to be 20 minutes. I think there's a good chance for him to get to 30 tonight. I think he's interesting at that point at 7,400. Now it's not ideal, but at low ownership, sure, I'll take a shot. I don't think I want to go crazy with Dame, but absolutely, like you kind of need Dame is sort of, it's the same thing I was saying about like Westbrook, but except for Dame is just, knocking down every three. And when he feels the team gets threatened, he just takes complete control. If Portland gets out to a decent lead early in this game, Damian Lillard is not going to pay off for you. If they get down early big, you can just count, start printing out the fact that, Lillard's going to put up 60. It happens every single time. And I don't really have a ton of interest in anybody else in this game. We've seen this matchup. Enes Kanter has been just like literally has done nothing against his old best friend, Steven Adams on the other side. So I don't think, and we've all been trying to find ways to play him, maybe on FanDuel because he's so cheap, but I don't see him as being, the matchup just seems to be absolutely terrible for him. But he's so cheap on FanDuel, he still might be able to get there. He just hasn't done it yet or ever against Steven Adams. That's pretty much it. Carmelo got some good run down the stretch in the last game and actually played pretty well. Maybe you could consider him. I think, he's actually been pretty solid. He and Gary Trent are the guys I'm sort of in the, okay, maybe we go 10% of those guys, but I don't love them.
Phoenix, Minnesota, to me is extremely interesting, specifically on, I don't say specifically on FanDuel, but definitely on FanDuel. So let's talk about DraftKings first. Karl Anthony Towns, I think is a very, very reasonable play here at 9,400. I think that Ricky Rubio on FanDuel, I didn't really pick him up too much on DraftKings, but it's a really good play. I don't know if I can pay 7,100 for Edwards, but maybe. And then on the Phoenix side, I think I want to play on DraftKings one of the two, Booker or Paul, and I might want to play Ayton also. And then we'll get back to it on FanDuel. Like everybody's free. I mean, like these Jay Crowders again at 3,800, and this Mikal Bridges is I think might be under 5K now or whatever it is. So you could do business there also. And then Minnesota, even on FanDuel, you have the other guy, I forget Rubio too. So I don't know. I think this could be the game.
I like what you're saying. I will give a massive lean towards Devin Booker.
Saric, I forgot Saric too. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah. I do think Saric is a little bit weaker now that Nader's questionable. So if we knew for sure Nader was out, I would say that Saric becomes a much better play. As it stands right now, I don't think that Saric is a guy I'm going to prioritize. I don't mind taking the shots with Jay Crowder still, but I think that Nader being in actually really affects that. 'Cause that's 18 minutes that gets split between basically those guys and Kaminsky. So, it's that extra 4, 5, 6 minutes could be huge. But I like, I have a hard time. I mean, this is one I really worry about staying close. I really do. I just,
yeah, sure.
Tends to pounce on everybody. Minnesota tends to get blown out. I will say though, for Minnesota, they've been a little bit more stubborn lately. And they've at least hung in games and they've looked a little better. I think that the main play for me in this game is going to be on the Minnesota side. It will be Edwards. Just I can't ignore how much he has the ball in his hands. He's had a usage of 28 or higher now in 9 straight games. It actually looks gross to me as a basketball fan because a guy who holds the ball that much and has that kind of usage rate and can't get an assist to save his life is kind of, it's not ideal as a basketball player, but fantasy wise, he's going to shoot the ball 20 plus times. So we'll take him. I wish he did some other things. He doesn't. But I think that the usage is just too high. I love Rubio too. Look, you get the Rubio going back to Phoenix. They got rid of him to try and win without a championship without him. Going back already, I don't know. I just feel like I think that in this spot, he's a really solid play. I loved him against the Lakers the other night. He did very well. I think this is even though it's a tough matchup with Chris Paul, he's 5,800. He's been getting like a ton of the run and a lot higher of usage than he usually has, I should say. And he's a guy at 20% usage you can actually put as being effective. So Rubio, I have a little bit higher than Edwards because of the price, but Rubio, Edwards, then Towns, and I like all of them. The problem is I worry about this game, so I don't want to prioritize them over everyone else. Regardless, I like Devin Booker. I think this is the exact kind of matchup, and we talked about it the other night, how that was a great matchup for him, Memphis. And he ended up missing his fourth quarter rotation and still put up 40 fantasy points. He probably would have been easily in the 50s. We saw 50 from him against Portland the other night. So if you get the full run out of Devin Booker tonight, I think you could be looking at 50 plus. He's my favorite play by far on this side, but they're all in play, like you said. Bridges, I think he's the one would be my second. Chris Paul being my third, Crowder being my fourth, and Ayton being my fifth. But I would probably be under the field on Ayton. I'm just getting tired of it, man. I'm getting tired of getting 4.5x out of a guy who looks like a great play and everybody plays every night. He's just not doing it. If there was a matchup where you'd think they would need him on the court, you'd think it would be this one, and it would actually benefit him because Cat leaks a lot of fantasy points to the opposing centers. But it's not my. I am worried about this game staying close. If it does, I think you want some game stacks using the guys I mentioned.
So for me, the Charlotte LA game, we got to talk a little narrative. You could explain because you're more the LeBron guy. So let me just talk reality for a minute. So LeBron is going to be the highest projected scorer on the slate. It's going to be a fast matchup against Charlotte. And aside from him, the only other guy that I immediately look to on LA is Taylor Horton Tucker. On Charlotte, from a strict value perspective, the only guy who pops for me is as always Zeller. He's always very tilting because he doesn't close, and you know what I mean. Like he never seems to win for me. But he does fine for me. He just never seems to kill it. Right. But I think what's interesting is to discuss is what type of environment is this? Is this one of those things where LaMelo's coming to LA and LeBron wants to just kind of show him who's boss, sort of, you know what I mean? Like, is it one of those show the rookie like a thing or two, or is it one of those also thing where LaMelo wants to come and show off for LeBron? Is that situation happening also? It's going to be a fun game to watch, I think.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's always fun. I love watching Charlotte play in general. Too many cooks in the kitchen in general these days for DFS purposes. It's really hard to try and guess and speculate on these guys. They got smoked last night, so don't take anything seriously from last night.
Yeah.
Monte Graham will probably help somebody win a tournament at 4,200 at some point, even though he's, coming off the bench, his minutes are pretty limited. But, you could definitely splash him in terms of a value play. If we're talking about guys like Bogdanovich, he would fit in the same kind of category, probably limited minutes, but certainly with some upside if he plays well. The only guys we know are going to be closing for this team ever, Hayward, Rozier. I mean, it does sort of rotate out some other things. Like sometimes they've had Bridges and sometimes they've had Nose. This matchup that you'd think they'd have to go bigger because the Lakers play big. But Gasol's out and Davis is out. So it's a little different than the usual situation. So normally I would say take a shot on a guy like Biyombo in a large field GPP. And maybe that's still not the worst idea. But Cody Zeller is cheap. He's on my list for right now. I don't love him, but look, there's just a lot of guys on Charlotte, and it's not a great matchup for them. I don't think LaMelo is a strong play, but I mean, look, he's going to be unowned, and anytime you can get an unowned LaMelo, I think it's kind of interesting. He's certainly going to go out there and I love his activity level. It makes him feel like he's always got a chance. I think Horton Tucker is going to be one of the highest owned players on the slate, and I love this. Hey, look, he won me the tournament the other night. I love this guy. He did great again the following night. He followed it up with a 30. I would point out he's been extremely efficient. He's been awesome offensively. When I watch him play defense, I'm wondering how he stays on the court as long as he does. And that's my only thing with him all the time. And that may be why he wouldn't be there at certain closing. But because of the point spread difference, because this, could lean a little blowouty, I just think he's got the upside where I'm probably going to have to eat some of the Dalen Horton Tucker.
What's the spread in this game?
10. Oh no, 8. But just the nature of how Charlotte plays versus the Lakers being good, it just opens up the possibility for. I mean, Charlotte lost by like 30 something last night to who did they even play?
Did they really?
They got smoked.
How do I know? I thought Charlotte was pretty good.
Oh, Denver. Yeah, they are pretty good. Doesn't mean you go to Denver, you go to LA, you're not gonna.
You go to LA with no Davis, you're supposed to be a 10-point underdog, really?
8-point underdog. Well, I mean, the Lakers have just been beating everybody, so I don't think with Schroeder, they've just beat the Warriors by 30 twice.
Is this a Schroeder or Kuzma type of game?
Yes, it is a Kuzma especially to me type of game. And I was going to mention as your pivot off of Horton Tucker, Mixon, he's not going to be unowned either, but I do like mixing in KCP here. And I like KCP if you're going to play LeBron, actually. Like, doesn't really take away much from him. It means if usually they'll be on the court at the same time. So Horton Tucker doesn't lend himself to playing. And look, he can go off at the same time as LeBron, no question. But then they'll play some minutes together. But down the stretch, closing games, KCP will be there in a tight game with LeBron, whereas Horton Tucker usually won't be with the way this lineup is currently. So that's my, the fancy way of saying LeBron and Horton Tucker are my favorite plays. I do think KCP is a really good pivot off of Horton Tucker. And that's probably as much as I'm going to, there's a little bit of interest in Harrell, a little bit of, I guess you could consider maybe I'm writing off, maybe I'm overlooking. I don't think I want to play Markieff Morris here, but I just was, trying to think for a creative play. I think that's pretty much it.
No Kuzma or Schroeder.
Oh, no, I do like Kuzma, but I don't think I want to go like crazy with him. His price is pretty up there. And Schroeder I like, but I don't think it's Schroeder's probably a better play than I give him credit for. I think he's going to be pretty popular. I don't want to get too crazy with him, but I do think Kuzma is a really, really good play at no ownership. Actually, this is a really good Kuzma matchup. Maybe we can get that, 12, 14 rebounds out of him again, and he can put up another one of those 45s for us. I think he's actually a really solid play. So I actually like that.
I was kind of like it's kind of envisioning like a fast-paced game with a lot of balls flying around, and maybe Schroeder can get some steals, and I don't know, maybe it's a good fast-paced. Schroeder's he can get some steals from time to time for sure. Like it's reasonable. I like Kuzma for that example. Like Kuzma will get you some blocks. He can get you some steals as well, and he's all over the place. And if he's rebounding, look, there's also the blowout run. He could potentially get an extended run. Now, the problem is they blow him out by too much. He always gets pulled off the court, but still, I think it is a good game for Kuzma. Before we talk FanDuel real quick, I just want to read my plays on DraftKings that
that I like early in the day. Ingles, I mean, just high ownership, regardless of Ingles, LeBron, Devin Booker, Horton Tucker, Ricky Rubio, Jordan Clarkson, Zion, Anthony Edwards, Kuzma, Bradley Beal, Burks, Lonzo, Capella, Mitchell. Those guys are all, but 25 and 35%. But I'll probably tighten that up as we go on today.
Okay, you want to move over to
Yeah, let's do it. So, point guard, loaded again. Sheets, you have a lean on point guard over here?
Yeah, I do actually.
All right.
So point guard, my top play is actually Chris Paul. He's probably going to be pretty chalky also, but I like him at 6,900. A guy we didn't mention on the Orlando game is Michael Carter-Williams. He remains pretty cheap over on FanDuel also. But Paul's my favorite, and then actually pretty disrespectful, man. Trey 8,800. I mean, I don't know. That could be a little cheap. So I would say Trey, Chris Paul, and Michael Carter-Williams.
I like the Michael Carter-Williams call. I'm just want to make sure who's in or not before I.
Yeah, well, of course.
Commit to anything with that. For some reason, my screen isn't shifting. Like I'm not able to access my FanDuel play.
And Rubio's not bad also.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look at this a different way. So I'm gonna go a little bit off the cuff here because I don't have my my projection screen for some reason. It's really frustrating. All right. So yeah, Lillard I think is more in play over here. Maybe you could argue it's not, but I just think it's easy to fit him in. Trey, absolutely at 88 makes a lot of sense. I'm probably going to be below the field on Chris Paul. I would rather play Lonzo personally. I think Lonzo actually has a higher median score in this matchup, and Chris Paul will have more ownership.
Interesting.
And I think Chris Paul, you just look at Chris Paul, 6,900. Yeah, absolutely. Let's play him against Minnesota. There's a lot of ways that not only blowouts, but like when they don't need Chris Paul, he doesn't put up big games. So like if Devin Booker's going, it'll be Devin Booker's night. He doesn't care. Chris Paul is like the real life MVP of the season so far, in my opinion. He won't really win the MVP, but he just is the most selfless. He's been awesome. Can't believe I'm talking this highly of Chris Paul. Schroeder and Rubio would be the other guys. I think that Rubio is probably a priority. So Rubio, if I had to rank them, it's really tough at this time of the day, but Rubio, Lonzo, if everybody's out, MCW and Lillard would be my guys. But I want to say, don't sleep on Jalen Noel. That's the one guy, if you're not going to play Rubio, first of all, he's been excellent in his minutes, even whether the games have been close or not. There is some blowout potential, but he's played over 20 minutes now, 6 games in a row, 27, 24, 27, 28 his last 4 games, including a 47 spot that he put up, 29 fantasy points the last game, 4,600. No one's playing this guy. They're playing him with Rubio at times now too. So if you really want to get cute or whatever, you could play a Carter Williams and Noel, or you can play anybody in Noel, to be honest. But I think Carter Williams and Noel, like you get that really, really low pay down, spend down and low ownership, and you can do whatever else you want. So I do like this position a lot, but I want to encourage people to not get away from Noel yet on both sides, but especially FanDuel.
At shooting guard for me, there's like different tiers of what you can do. So like the first thing I would say is that if Quickly plays, I think he's, pretty strong at 5,100. Obviously see if he plays. Then I do think that probably one of those 2 Utah guys is gonna smash or get there or not, or you're gonna want either Ingles or Clarkson. I think that would be my guess there. If Quickly's out, or even if he's in, I don't know. Like Alec Burks once again is only 4,500.
Is he? They moved him to shooting guard?
Yep.
Oh, they moved him to shooting guard from small forward. Okay. Oh wait, he was small forward. He's been small forward on. I'm sorry, got it mixed up. He's been small forward on DraftKings, not on FanDuel.
But if you want to spend up a little bit more, I mean, you could. We talked about maybe fading Chris Paul, like you said, and we could play Devin Booker at 7,500. Certainly nothing wrong with that. And then the other guy you mentioned, Bradley Beal. Again, you want to spend all the way up for him too. But I do think that. And then Taylor Horton Tucker 3,700. There's a lot of ways you could go in here. But I wouldn't play Ingles and Clarkson together necessarily, and it's just going to be very news driven, man. With Quickly's going to drive a couple of things. Is that it? I guess that was the only thing I was going to think about.
Yeah, there's a lot of good plays here. Okay, so I don't think you want to play like, I don't think you want to get creative with like, what's his name? What's the price over here for Horton Tucker?
3,700.
Oh, I thought he was 4,700. Oh my goodness. All right, well, he's more in play, but I don't think you need to do that over here. I would rather jump up and play Eric Bledsoe and Alec Burks at 4,500.
Okay. Bledsoe, I didn't think of that.
Play Joe Ingles at 4,400, who's going to be the chalk for good reason. Jordan Clarkson at 5,200. That's sort of the natural build. And then this is one I like to do together because I'm sort of hoping the game stays close. Play the Booker and Edwards combination together, probably.
That's cool.
That's what I would like to do and just spend up. But there's a lot of good options in the low tier. So I think people might pick one of those guys and play with one of these cheap guys. I'm all for playing these cheap guys, but I would like to jump over there. And then the hard part for me is that Shea is also just, I mean, Shea and Mitchell, I mean, these are criminal prices. Maybe you could actually say Shea and Booker would be better than Edwards and Booker. I mean, I just think there's a lot of good plays at shooting guard, so a lot of different ways to go. But Shea and Mitchell should both be on your list as well.
LeBron for me is a tough fade. I think that he's clearly the best play at small forward, and probably, I mean, just a huge priority to get in. I honestly don't know. Given the lack of points maybe on the slate, I don't know how I could fade that. So I like LeBron at small forward. And the second position, though, not you have to play multiple lineups, whatever. Is I mentioned earlier, a little disrespect. Michael Bridges 4,900. Sounds good to me. He'll probably be popular, I guess. If Quigley's out, a little sneaky boost maybe for RJ Barrett. I don't know. Mm-hmm. So maybe play him anyway. So RJ Barrett, he's probably be popular too. But so Bridges, Barrett, dart throw, Bogdan maybe Josh Hart. Just for me, LeBron is just clearly the one you got to get in though.
Yeah, I like Josh Hart. I mean, he put out like he's a good FanDuel player in general because he's so active and he will occasionally get you those steals and blocks. It's been he had a few games where he didn't, but he had a couple last game. Put up 30 and 34 the last two games, 34.8 against this team last time. Did miss the closing minutes, but only like the last minute and a half it was that I think he came out. 4,700 feels like a good price. I like Bridges as well. Long shot play is Hachimura, completely unowned one. I kind of like that as a way to get really different. And then you get Barrett, Ingram, and LeBron. I think LeBron is a priority, like you said. I think Ingram is an interesting way to double spend up. And if you want to play the semi-correlation, I think Hayward is the safest of all the Charlotte guys. And I don't really even mind the matchup all that much for him. So, but if I'm ranking it, I think LeBron number one. And then all of these, Rui, Bridges, Hart, potential value. But I think that LeBron and Ingram, because we can spend down at other spots, is my natural lean.
Power forward, Julius Randle is, he's significantly cheaper than on DraftKings, and I think he's probably just pretty darn cheap in general at 9,200. Now, again, it's not like the fastest pace game in the world, right? But you got to find your points from somewhere, and there's not a lot going on here. So Zion at 8,400 is fine. And then after that, watch for news on Capela. If Capela's out, they did a decent job though. They Collins is not 6,600 anymore at least. It moved up to 7,500. That makes it competitive at least. So even if Capela's out, maybe Collins isn't a lock at 7,500, but I might play him anyway. And then these cheapies on Phoenix, you got to watch the news for, right? The the Crowder and the Saric, or you said to watch for Abdel Nader, right?
Yeah, just to keep them open up, open things up a little bit for them.
Okay.
Yeah. Why is this not working for me? Interesting. I cannot sort by my.
I would suggest Kuzma might be as a
Yeah, I love Kuzma as a long shot. I also think Miles Bridges at 41 is kind of interesting. Those are sort of the wild card plays. Royce O'Neal's too cheap at 4,400. I don't know about too cheap. He's just cheap. He's an interesting. Those are the pay downs for me.
You want to go back to the skinny guy?
Pokievsky. I'm actually going to play some Pokievsky today.
Okay.
I just think that you're going to get more of the good out of this guy in the long run. I mean, look, he's going to look horrible at time on the court, but I just feel like he's Actually, I think he's a really good play. When no one's going to play him and all the things are going to look against him. Let's make sure he's in the starting lineup again too, because he did start alongside Horford too before, but I'm not 100% sure it'll go that way. But I think that, look, Randall, Zion, and Collins stand out as being awesome plays. I would try to get to those guys, and then Kuzma, the long shotty, or whatever, not long shot, just the other range. Poku. Honestly, even with okay, so the weird one is that I just want to see how many minutes Roby ends up playing. I'm curious how many minutes Roby ends up playing in this spot with Baisley out, but Horford back. So that's what worries me about Poku, but also it does make Roby sort of interesting. But mostly I think I would lean just for Poku here. I think your best way to play, though, is to try to spend up at power forward because it really is easy to do, and the guys are all too cheap.
So at center, you got to watch Horford, Moses Brown starting, that type of thing. And Moses Brown starts at 4,400. There's another free square, honestly. Well, maybe not. I don't know. But he's certainly going to project to be the best value by a lot. The spend ups, I would be interested to know if either of these guys are going to be really low on between Cat, Vooch, and Gobert. If I think that any of them are going to be 10% or less, I think I'm going to try it. I just got to keep an eye on the ownership projections. And likewise, Capela, if he plays, I think he's in play as well. So it's an ownership thing for me. I don't think, oh boy, they're making it tempting, man. Cantor at 6K on the nose. That's
what I said, man. It's the price. Then you look at the matchups, and it's like he always scores 20 fantasy points against him. But not to mention he's probably going to have ownership because of that. But maybe are we a little bit better off just playing Al Horford at that point?
Yeah, right.
I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I think. Look, I think center over here. You want to play Vooch and Towns, in my opinion, if you can. Okay. And we did mention a bunch of other places to spend down. If you wanted to spend down here, I think that. I do think Cantor is 6K. Cantor and Horford are interesting. If I don't know if they would start Moses Brown alongside alongside Horford. But after the game he had the other night, what if they did? It's just something to think about. Like if we can get that information in time, there's a chance they could, because Horford can. The problem is Horford likes playing the 5, and Brown is not really a 4. Because he can't do anything but, like we said, dunk and cut to the rim, and make free throws. So
and get 20 rebounds.
Yeah. So maybe Zeller is actually in play as the spend down here. Food for thought. If Capela's in, I do like Capela, but I think mostly again, if you can get Towns or Vooch, they're both really good plays. I really don't like this position as much as the other ones, so. I'm definitely going to be building out centers last on FanDuel because I do have some priorities at all the other positions, and I don't feel decidedly so about anybody here except for maybe Vooch, I guess.
All right,
guys. Well, but we'll be back with you, I think, at 6, right? And then hopefully we'll have some golf to talk about. We'll have some NBA DFS. We'll hopefully have another win tonight. Hopefully other people can get involved, and we'll all take down a big one.
Yeah, the anti-sweat is definitely, I'm telling you who it's going to be. It's going to be the chalky Russell Henley. He's going to be the one I'm going to have to anti-sweat.
I have 35% of Henley, so I'm not worried about it.
Let him come second. Let him come second.
Yeah, absolutely. Just let him come second. I have plenty of him with Jones.
Let him come second.
All right, guys. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Good luck to everybody. Thanks, Sheets, and we'll see you at the top of the leaderboards.
All right.